All right. Hello, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know still have people coming in, but we want to make sure and give Dr. Induja as much time as possible. My name is James Caldwell, and I'm Safe Schools Coordinator for Frisco ISD, and we're glad you're with us here tonight. I've had the chance of hearing Dr. Induja speak a couple of times at the International Bullying Prevention Association Convention over the last couple of years. He does a lot of work with them, and we're glad to have him here tonight. Dr. Samir Hinduja is professor in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Florida Atlantic University. He's co-director of the Cyberbullying Research Center and faculty associate in the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. He's recognized internationally for his groundbreaking works on the subjects of cyberbullying and safe social media use. He has written 7 books, and his interdisciplinary research is widely published and cited in a number of peer-reviewed academic journals. In addition, he's frequently asked to provide expert commentary by news organizations, and his work has been featured in venues that include CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, the BBC, and the New York Times. He's received Auburn University's Global Anti-Bullying Hero Award, won Florida Atlantic University's Researcher of the Year Award, presented on cyberbullying at congressional briefings on Capitol Hill, testified in the front of Attorney General and the Departments of Education, Health and Human Services, and Homeland Security. Dr. Induja is also the co-founder and co-editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Bullying Prevention, a new peer-reviewed journal from Springer. So Dr. Hinduja, we are glad to have you tonight, and I'll just turn it over to you. I think we're going to do questions at the end. So probably the last 15 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, just put those in the chat. Dr. Induja.
Thank you, James. Appreciate the kind introduction, and Heather also for facilitating and all the logistics. Really appreciate you as well. Thank you everyone who's joining me today. You probably had a very long day, work day, and then of course family, and you still probably have to put them to bed after this. I know I'm an hour ahead of you, and my wife is going to help put the kids down while I'm giving this presentation. We only have about an hour together, and so I just want to say to start off with that maybe I don't go into so much depth with certain things that you want me to cover. I hope that you follow up with me. I promise to get back to you if you reach out in any capacity. I'm here to help. I have a long-standing relationship with the district, and I want to be able to come through for you. So if you need any follow-up, if you need a specific resource, if you're looking for a tip sheet or a how-to guide or videos to help, just anything, just reach out and I'm happy to get you whatever you need. Also happy to send you a PDF of these slides. If you'd like, just drop me an email and I'll get that over to you. I know that Heather and the rest of the team also, I believe, uploaded to Google Drive, or maybe it was linked from that flyer, a bunch of handouts. Those are also available on my website. I'll give you that information later, but we find those to be really actionable and helpful. I don't create fluff. And so hopefully you'll be able to use them and avail yourself of them in any way that you can. Let me share my slide. And let me minimize all of these Zoom controls so that I can see everything I need to see. All right. You see my contact information up there. Feel free to follow me on social media as well. I'm pretty active, at least on Twitter and sometimes on Instagram, mostly with family stuff. So the first thing I want to say is that there's a lot of positives to technology and social media. And many times the media only likes to focus on the negatives. In this case, we have a youth just sort of destigmatizing some of the negatives associated with mental health and seeing a therapist. And that really frustrates me when I see all of the shame being cast towards people who seek help. That cannot be happening. And so as youth continue to demonstrate that this is helpful, it becomes more normative. It becomes something that's socially accepted. We've also seen youth spend time creating videos which point out how, for example, mindfulness has assisted them as they deal with a number of stresses, especially over the last year, 14, 15 months or so. Another person sharing about overcoming an eating disorder. Whenever a youth or an adolescent is dealing with anything, it feels like they're often the only person dealing with it. And to hear stories of others, especially those who have overcome, it just goes such a long way to provide them with the encouragement they need to also be able to overcome various forms of adversity. Here we have a student in a TEDx format sharing about overcoming anxiety. I've personally struggled with anxiety, perhaps some of you have as well, and perhaps many of our kids have as well too. But again, just the sharing of these stories, the conveying of various sorts of vulnerabilities actually allows us to know that other people have gone through the same things we're struggling with and they've made it to the other side. Consequently, so can we. Without technology, we wouldn't have various sorts of services such as crisis text line. And we know that many youth are hesitant to orally express what's going on in their lives, whether it's in person or even on the phone. And they're very much more comfortable talking via text. And so this specific helpline helps them towards that end, directs them to professional counselors, and those have been specifically trained to give them the wisdom or the advice or the counsel that they need. Or they'll also connect them with localized support in their own community. We know, for example, social media is allowing us to connect, and it could be automated, many times it is automated, connect with people who betray certain tendencies. Maybe they're extremely sad, maybe they're betraying suicidal ideation. Well, in those cases, the app itself will flag it and then quickly send out these automated messages and will also sort of bring into the conversation someone like a human, manual moderation, manual help, if necessary, if they want to talk to someone specifically. Technology has improved so much so that we're even seeing in live streams that we can identify and flag problematic content against suicidal thoughts or attempts, anything like that, and get help from boots on the ground. And here again, if you use a hashtag like hashtag I'm not okay, that will be flagged. That will then force the system to send you various sorts of automated messages, and then again, hopefully connect you to a real life person as necessary to support you, to provide you with whatever resources you need. I also want to talk about the gig economy because we're moving deeper and deeper into an information-based society and economy, and you understand this based on you just living and you being aware as an adult. Well, according to young people, this is what they love about the gig economy. And I feel like more and more people, more and more of our youth, our children, will want to not work, let's say, an 8-to-5 job for a number of years, but instead freelance, have multiple employers, let's say, or clients, just sort of move from different sorts of fields as they continue to develop various skill sets based on what they're currently interested in. And so all of this says to me, we want our kids to feel extremely comfortable online, safe, supported, and then also become more and more proficient. And you only become proficient when you constantly are taking the time to play in this sandbox, so to speak, and learn various sorts of skills in terms of interacting and freelancing and having a clean digital reputation, promoting yourself, branding yourself, etc. All of that doesn't come naturally to me. And I'm hoping that it comes naturally to more and more kids where you have to kind of be your own advocate, your best advocate. And that's what will lead in part to many opportunities that are presented to our children. We have a ton of people coming in late, which is totally fine and wonderful, but that's why you might see a little gray bar on top of my slides because I keep getting those, certain warnings, and we're admitting them from the waiting room into our live presentation. Let's move on. Cyberbullying, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this. You understand it. It's basically being a jerk using technology. There's a strong overlap with regular bullying because the aggressors are primarily peers from school. It's not, stranger danger, some random person out there. It's primarily people who know each other, whether it's school, whether it's soccer or some other sort of extracurricular activities. And whatever bubbles up online gets carried on the next day into school. Whatever bubbles up at school, then of course continues online, whether it's in a gaming platform, whether it's on social media, group text, group chat, etc. I shared with the educators that I spoke with today how, there's so many apps, and there's so many gaming platforms, and not so many, but a good number. It feels like it's exhausting because we have to stay on top of all of these new developments. And how are we supposed to do that? It's miserably exhausting just to think about a new app coming down the pike and how we have to carve out more time to become somewhat familiar with it. But what I tried to convey to them and what I want to convey to you is that all of these apps, games, they work primarily in the same sorts of ways where, you have a network of friends or followers, you post stuff, you share stuff, or you're playing a game, there's a bit of interactivity that goes on, whether it's synchronous at the same time, or asynchronous when it comes to a caption and then comments and messages and so forth over time. And then there's usually some sort of affirmation or validation that people seek, whether it's likes, whether it's friend requests or follower requests, whether it's leveling up in games or obtaining certain badges, etc. So that's pretty much how they all work. And all the things that you're just normally focusing in on as a parent, such as raising a decent human being in your home, well, continue to just focus on that, such as like empathy and having an ethical code and a moral compass, being empathetic towards other people, being others focused instead of self-focused. All of that will bear fruit offline as well as online. And we'll talk more about that. I conducted a research project with my colleague, Justin Patchen, last summer. It was sponsored by the AT&T Foundation and Cartoon Network to focus in on tweens. Tweens had never been studied before in this context. What we found was that 1 out of 2 have been bullied at school, and about 1 out of 8 have been cyberbullied. You can see on the right side of the chart, those who admitting to bullying others at school and cyberbullying others. When it comes to cyberbullying others with the major genders, it's a tiny percentage, but maybe that makes sense because not every kid who's between 9 and 12 has a phone or has the apps or whatever that they might need. When it comes to cyberbullying amongst teens, 12 to 17-year-olds, so middle schoolers and high schoolers across America, if I draw your attention to the second and the fourth group of bars, you see that it's about 1 out of 4 have been cyberbullied and about 1 out of 8 or so have cyberbullied others. Online bullying occurs a lot less frequently than school-based bullying, despite what the media might have you believe. Still, these are significant percentages. I wish they were 0% because it could be my kid, could be your kid. Maybe it has been. It's important to point out that over half of the students who dealt with cyberbullying said it deeply affected their ability to learn and feel safe at school. And that's a huge deal because many times you have an adult who might say, okay, you're dealing with this. Well, just put down your phone, just go outside, just delete the app or stop playing that game and you won't be dealing with this anymore. But I feel like that's unfortunately just a bit dismissive and it just trivializes what our kids are going through because they're not able to compartmentalize online and offline. It's just all the same. They just move seamlessly through both and that's how they do life. And so even if they are not on the app, even if they're not playing the game anymore, even if they lose their phone for some reason, their imagination will take the harassment to its worst possible extent if they don't actually see and know what's going on. So we just have to continue to come alongside them without always sort of conveying judgment or blame or criticism. Let's talk about sexting real quick. According to our research, it's about 1 out of 4 middle schoolers and high schoolers. We did not ask this when it came to the tweens. 1 out of 4 middle schoolers or high schoolers across America have received a nude. 14% have sent a nude. About 1 out of 4 have been asked for a nude, and about 11% have asked somebody else for a nude. And I was chatting with James Caldwell a little bit earlier, and these numbers are pretty in line with what he's found in your district as well. I think that's safe to say. So I cover sexting when I speak to youth and give assemblies in a number of ways. I talk a little bit about the whole sort of the fact that it's child pornography, but the reality is that that message doesn't deter youth as much as we would like or hope that it would. Instead, I talk about love. I talk about how these relationships typically end in middle school and high school. They don't stand the test of time. I talk about how during a breakup, when it's your first love, it's not sort of like a hunky-dory sort of affair. I don't use that term, but just work with me. We talk about how people want revenge and hearts have been shattered and images and videos get shared with friends and buddies just to sort of deal with the heavy emotions you've never felt before of a breakup. And I also bring up sextortion because it's a reality amongst young people. You have this formal academic definition. We published a paper on it, but just understand that this is how it goes. Nudes get out, and then someone messages you and says, if you don't go ahead and send me more nudes or engage in sexual activity with me or send me money or stay in a relationship with me or be in a relationship with me, then I'm going to release these images or videos out to the rest of the world. Middle schoolers and high schoolers across America, when we collected data in 2019, it was about 6% of males or boys, 4.7% of females. It's just a tiny tick higher than what we found in 2016. And we are collecting new data on this over the next couple of months. And so you're welcome to follow up with me if you're curious. My gut feeling is that it's probably going to hover around the same sort of numbers. I know this is only about like 1 out of 20 youth, but again, I just want this to be on your radar so that we have these conversations with our kids and we try to proactively help them understand that this is a potential when nudes get out there. So let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about solutions. The first thing I want to say is that, we have to go online with our kids in some capacity. We have to continue to communicate, even though for many of us, it's a little bit uncomfortable talking about the latest app or various apps or certain games. We feel like we're out of our league, at least some of us. We don't want to use the wrong technological jargon. And so it's tough. Plus, we're expecting that the school is covering this. And the school is, from all these multiple hours I've spent with educators, not just today, but in the past as well, from Frisco ISD. They're doing a lot of really, really good things when it comes to policy, programming, prevention, response. I have a piece about what they're doing, but we need a united front. We need parents to be, having these conversations. We want them to set up various sorts of rules, which we'll talk about, because, they're introducing their kids to the devices at a pretty young age, maybe increasingly young as these years continue to move forward. I also understand I want to be gracious towards all parents because we're surviving. Like, life has been so stressful, so difficult, especially over the last year. Sometimes we need to use the television or the Roku or the tablet or the phone to just give ourselves a couple of minutes mental break to get caught up. So I get that. But in terms of getting online with your kids, ideally you're able to, let's say, click on the screen. Let's say go to Starbucks, get your favorite beverage, sit down at a table, get on the Wi-Fi and just chat very positively, very pro-socially about what are you loving these days, son, daughter? What are some things that are becoming a little lame? What are some new apps that your friends have used, but you haven't tried it yet, but maybe you want to? What are some disruptive possibilities when it comes to AR or VR that you're seeing? Things like that. Just try to have these sort of basic vanilla conversations without getting too intense at the very beginning. Try to enter their worlds. Maybe they'll teach you a few things, especially if you bought them their favorite treat at Starbucks, and start early. Not to say that the middle school years are too young or too old, but we've got to start incredibly early. I would say the beginning of elementary school, if not sooner. My kids are very young and, my oldest is pretty proficient with a tablet, even though it doesn't really seem like she should be. Plus, we have to watch our own words. You and I are capable of being a jerk and being a little bit cranky and irritable because we're exhausted all the time and life is hard. But when we mess up, we just have to call it out. Be like, oh, nuts. I'm so sorry, son, daughter. I messed up there. I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have said it with that tone. We're better than that. We're the Hindujas. We have certain family standards and we rise up to those standards no matter what. And when we make a mistake, we ask for forgiveness. Son, daughter, please forgive me for acting that way because, we don't. And I just made a mistake and there's no excuse for it. We don't want to always be giving our kids sort of like ways that they can rationalize or justify being a little bit cruel or sharp or biting with what we say, because then they'll use the same excuses when they're trying to do this, when they do the same sort of thing, even though, again, they've hurt somebody else on the other side. So again, just call it out and have standards. These are my standards in my household. We have this on the wall in the family room where everyone spends most of the time of the day. And so you can see we put a lot of thought into this, my wife Rachel and I, to think through what do we care about? What matters a lot? And so we can point to this sign now, and we'll be pointing to it for all these months and years, where God willing, we're able to continue to raise up our children as long as nothing awful happens. And so we want to be able to say, look, did that demonstrate humility? Did that demonstrate honesty? That's our Hinduja family values up there. And that's what we live by. That's what we abide by. Whether it's online or whether it's offline, I'm sure we're going to be able to point to this all the time. I hope you have something similar. So when it comes to spending time with our kids and just chatting about these sorts of things, I mentioned that you should start in a more innocuous vanilla type way, but you can ask them a number of questions and then over time get into the more probing questions. On our website and also in the handouts you've received or you can download, we have a document called Questions Parents Should Ask. And it's got a number of these, way more than this, just to sort of help you to stimulate conversation with your child about this. And again, hopefully you're catching them in a receptive moment, maybe on the way to school or on the way home from school or the way to practice or when you're about to go out to eat to their favorite restaurant. You just have to be strategic about it. I know many times they just roll their eyes or don't want to talk to you. I know that's challenging, but we just got to keep pressing in. This is what we signed up for. So there's been a lot of really good research done out of the University of Pennsylvania with Adam Grant and Martin Sigelman, some other scholars, related to how we raise our children and specifically how we commend them for good behavior and how we express disapproval when it comes to bad behavior. And I'll bring this all back around as it relates to tech use in just a couple of minutes. But let's go through this because I think there's some really important take-home points. First off, there was this one huge study done involving 50 different countries. And they asked parents across those 50 different countries, hey, parents, what are the dominant traits or characteristics you're trying to instill in your children as you're raising them up? And way up there on the list was, you know what? We want them to be high achievers. We want them to be successful. But what was really cool, above success and achievement across each of these 50 different countries was, you know what? We want them to be kind, loving, caring, others focused, compassionate. And so we might intuitively assume that was going to be the case, but it was really neat to see that borne out in the research. So then there's been a lot of studies done involving twins because they're trying to get to the bottom of, is it nature or is it nurture? And what they found was that the tendency to be kind and caring and compassionate is about 25 to 50% due to nature. It's genetic, it's actually inherited. But what that also means is that 50 to 75% is due to nurture, which means it's on my shoulders as a parent and as an educator. It's on your shoulders as parents or educators, coaches, mentors, youth leaders in the community, whatever you do. And you might be like, oh crap, another thing on my shoulders. But you might be like, oh sweet, this means I do have agency and autonomy to sort of shape the direction in which they go. So hopefully we're encouraged. So when we're commending our children for doing the proper things, the right things, number one, we want to make sure that it is rooted in praise and not reward. We want to make sure that they're not just doing the right thing because we're holding out a carrot. I work with this organization in every weekend, and I work specifically with elementary schoolers. And I have been guilty of, in the past, many, many years ago, saying things like, hey, everyone, listen, if you would just be quiet for 20 minutes and pay attention to our guest speaker, I promise to give you candy afterwards. But then I saw this research and I felt incredibly guilty. And I was like, I can't be doing that anymore because then they're doing the right thing for candy when they should be doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So I promise you, since that time, haven't done it. So again, praise instead of reward. Secondly, we want to make sure that we commend their actions as a reflection of their character. What do I mean by this? Let's say that I'm in the kitchen helping with dinner and we're making stew. And my wife is over here with the bouillon cubes and the chicken broth, and she's working on, the broth of everything. And I'm over here on one cutting board and I'm trimming the fat off the chicken breasts. And let's say that my little girl, Maya, she's over here on a cutting board and she's chopping up the celery and the carrots and the potatoes. Potatoes, that's a little bit scary because they're hard to cut. But carrots, celery, what else? Yeah, something like that. You get it. Well, I want to compliment her. I want to commend her. And so I say, wow, Maya, thank you for being really helpful. Now that's totally legitimate. You could say that. But according to the research, what you need to say instead is, wow, Maya, you're such a helper. I love that whenever me or your mom needs something, you just sort of swoop in and come through. The world needs more helpers just like you. So you see what I did there, just a little bit of wordsmithing, but it's so very important because we need to label our kids in positive ways. You've heard about negative labeling and it becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy where if we say really cruel things to our children or other youth serving leaders do that, well, then they just internalize it and say, everyone's given up on me, and they become that person that they've been called. But if you flip it and you label them in positive ways, like you're such a great helper, such a great listener, such a great encourager, well, then they rise up to that opportunity. They rise up whenever that opportunity presents itself. Because again, they've been positively validated and affirmed. And they're all looking desperately, as you know, based on their social media use, for that affirmation and for that validation. So our kids mess up. We have to come down on them, sometimes hard. So when we do so, there's two directions in which this can go. And please forgive me if you already know the difference, but the first direction is guilt. And the second direction is shame. And guilt is where your child thinks to themselves, I did a bad thing. But shame is where your child thinks to themselves, I'm a bad person. We never want that message internalized by our children. The research shows that when we cultivate guilt, they become amenders or problem solvers. But when we cultivate shame, they lash out at the person who shamed them and or they run away from their problems. They become avoiders. So again, we have to convey, look, this behavior was wrong, seriously jacked up, but you know I love you unconditionally. You know I'm going to remain your biggest fan. But you've got to make this right because it was a huge, huge mistake. So again, you do so in a supportive environment. Again, conveying that you unconditionally love them. Shame is so devastatingly bad for them, for their psyche, for their well-being. They internalize it straight off. Some of you, by the way, and this happened to me too, not to get too personal with you, but I remember being shamed by, let's say, something my mom or my dad said. They didn't mean it, but they shamed me. And I still remember those words, even though, of course, right now we're great, we're super close, and it's been like that way for a very long time. But those words stick. So convey to your child that the behavior was wrong. And you might be like, oh man, we covered these root reasons for multiple times in the past. But again, if it's a different app, if it's a different environment, if it's with a different friend group, if the other person did something that seems to have warranted, they can justify it. But you have to be like, no, for these same root reasons, it was wrong. Secondly, we got to get them to understand that their behaviors do not occur in a vacuum. I'm guilty of this because I remember telling my mom, what the heck, mom? I don't see how what I'm doing and how I'm living my life affects you at all. Like, please, let me just live my life. That's just so childish, you know, and you do know, because when you get older, you realize that absolutely my actions, they affect a ton of things. They affect the opportunities that are going to come my way. They affect what the school thinks of me, what my friends' parents think of me, what my friends think of me. It affects how my younger siblings are going to be treated as they move through the school system that I just graduated from, let's say. So ton of implications, and we need our children over time to understand this. Plus, I mentioned that when we cultivate guilt, they become problem solvers. So let's say that my son, Ravi, he messes up on Snapchat. Someone takes a screenshot and now he's busted. I could say, Ravi, I need you to write a letter of apology to this other kid for what you did. Now, that's a great solution, but what I think is even more valuable is for us to say something like, Ravi, you messed up. How are you going to make things right? How are you going to restore equilibrium in this relationship? And hopefully, of his own accord and imagination, he comes up with a pretty solid solution. I can, of course, fill in the gaps, but what's the point? The point is, in the safe and supportive environment of being under my roof and being at home, he's able to practice how to deal with social and relational conflict. Because if we never give them practice, then they become college students and adults who are unable to deal with conflict, which you and I know from experience is part and parcel of just living, of adulting. It happens all the time sometimes. And so again, we want to try to give them the practice right now so that, you know, they don't freak out or do something really wrong when they're dealing with conflict down the road. Let's talk about resilience. Whenever I think about resilience, I think about a rubber ducky. You push it underwater, what happens? Pops back up to the surface. Now, very honestly, most bullying is not major. And please, no, I'm not trivializing what happens in your situation or your kid's situation. I don't know. But most of it is name calling, insults, exclusion, rejection, social sabotage, relational aggression. It's not like a fist fight over and over again. Similarly, cyberbullying, it's not usually threats. It's usually mild, like people just going off on you. And not to say that any of that is acceptable, but what we need to remember is that we want our kids to have developed certain skills of resilience so that they can shrug off that sort of stuff. Because as they continue to succeed and ideally obtain positions down the road of power and prestige and status, there's going to be all sort of haters that come out of the woodwork wanting to tear them down for a number of reasons: jealousy, envy, insecurity, their own issues, etc. So again, we want them to develop a toolbox of resiliency skills in order to cope with that, so they don't fall apart, so they don't internalize the harm all the time. Let's talk more about this. So resilience is actually an innate quality. I think often about the maple trees outside of my in-laws home. And so every February, we tap these maple trees, not every February, but some Februaries, we tap the maple trees and we bring in the maple syrup into the kitchen. And there's this purification process that goes on. We boil it, put it in jars, give it to loved ones. It's like this family quality time thing to do. So with resilience, again, we just have to tap it. It's in every single one of our kids, but then we have to just embolden it and support it and encourage it. And hopefully it'll just get bigger and bigger. We published a paper on resilience in this solid journal, and we found a lot of things. We found out that resilience matters, but here's another point that I wanted to share with you. Those kids with the highest levels of resilience, when they were cyberbullied, and just for a second, let's assume it's going to happen. When they were cyberbullied, they engaged in what are called pro-social responses. They reported it to the school, to the site. They changed their screen name. They called the police. They deleted their account. They blocked the quote unquote bully. I don't like that term, but just work with me here. They logged out. Whereas those kids with the lowest levels of resilience, when they were cyberbullied, they did nothing. They suffered silently because they didn't believe that they had the ability, the agency, the autonomy to control their online experience, to keep the haters from getting to them, to keep the trolls from trolling, to keep all the annoying jerks and clowns and jokers out there from bothering them. But again, we want them to be resilient. We want them to know that they can take advantage of the controls and settings and features within the app. And similarly, if it's at school, they can have a little bit of control there too, talking to an adult, getting their friends to help out, etc. We want them to grow in resilience. So the first thing that comes to mind related to building resilience has to do with helper words. It sounds silly, it sounds very basic, but everything, not everything, but so many things are just like the battlefield of the mind. What are the things that we tell ourselves? And are they resilient in nature, or do they compromise our ability to be resilient? Whenever you are dealing with some sort of adversity, I bet you say things in your mind. Your sort of like internal playback mechanism just says things to help you get through it. Whether you're trying to finish a workout, whether you're dealing with a household project that's taking too long, whether it's a work project, which is just frustrating you, you say certain things to your mind to help you to push through and to overcome it. Well, we want our youth to have at the tip of their tongue a number of phrases or helper words to also get them through whatever adversity they're facing. You might assume they have that, but they likely don't. So work with them on that, and you'll see it actually helps. Here are my favorite books related to resilience, and I can talk to you about any one of these. Of Human Bondage is a classic from 100 years ago, but I still think of the main character, Philip, and what he had to go through. He had this deformity, a club foot, and he was incredibly embarrassed and insecure about that. He kind of hated himself. He wanted to have a romantic relationship with a girl. He wanted to succeed professionally, but his insecurities and self-hatred really kept him down. And very, very honestly with you, I really struggled with self-hatred when I was growing up. And so this book, it changed my life. And I'm hoping that books have changed your life, and books can change our children's life as well. Here are my favorite movies where resilience is a dominant theme with the main characters. And so the point is, when we show a movie to our children, yes, we're exhausted afterwards and we just want to brush their teeth and go to sleep, but we need to have a conversation about the main takeaways. I have this rule in my household where I don't watch a movie unless it's potentially life-changing. And I know that sounds really ridiculous and intense, and people for sure, maybe deservedly, make fun of me, but I want to be changed. I want to be inspired. I want to be impacted. So if I watch a movie with my kids, we would have a conversation about like, what are the takeaways and how can we apply this to our life? And usually there's a great message, but we have to reinforce it and we have to have those conversations. Maybe the next morning over breakfast or on the car ride. That's my dad. His name is Kumar, and that's my sister, Bhavita. She's a middle school counselor. My dad came over from India without knowing a soul because he wanted a better life for his future children. My point is that he had to face adversity and overcome it. He is very resilient, and you, all of you have stories of resilience in your own life, and I pray that you're able to share them with your children when, again, they're receptive to hearing your stories. Because then down the road, I think that when an opportunity presents itself, they will remember that in their family, they have resilience. It's who they are. It's what their family is. And so hopefully they again rise up just like you did, just like your partner did. Let's talk about empathy briefly. Empathy is, of course, feeling what somebody else feels. That's effective empathy, but It's also cognitive empathy, where it's like you're understanding what they're saying, how they feel, even if you can't really fully relate to it, even if what they're saying or feeling is like completely opposite however you would think or feel. That's empathy. And you know as well as I do that we need so much more of that in our society. We conducted research on this. Let's just summarize it briefly. Students with, and these are middle schoolers and high schoolers across America. Students with low empathy, almost 2 times as likely to bully someone at school and over 2 times as likely to cyberbully someone in the last month. And those with high levels of empathy were over 2 times less likely to bully and almost 3 times less likely to cyberbully. What's the takeaway? Empathy matters, huge deal. But are we intentional about building empathy in our youth? Here are my favorite shows where empathy is dominant. And again, I hope that we can have conversations when we use multimedia to convey various moments and messages. I know it's easy to just put them in front of the television and have them watch a solid show, whether it's, well, we really like The Lion Guard and Bubble Guppies or we have in the past. So, we trust that they're learning the lesson, but if we don't really talk to them about the lesson, then are they really learning it? Are they just being entertained? Even though, again, there's clearly a lesson to be learned. So we just have to make time for the conversations. Here are my favorite books where empathy is dominant. Some of them you've read while you were growing up. I can talk to you or follow up with you, give you the list of any of these. And I wouldn't recommend them unless they were great. I also think about how, well, my story was in elementary, middle, and high school, I hung out with the same kids the whole time. I'm only friends with one of them still in terms of being in touch after all these years. But I wonder, could I have hung out with other people who didn't belong to my specific clique? And maybe I would have made some best friends that I would never have, and maybe they would have changed my life for the better. So again, we have these cliques, unfortunately. And so maybe you need some sort of formal assignment where you task a child to formally interview somebody else that they would not normally sit next to at lunch or get to know or befriend. Maybe you give them a list of questions, and some of those questions are easy. Some of them are a little bit hard, forces both of them to be a little bit vulnerable so that they both realize that, wow, we have much more in common than we have different. And I just thought that we were different because you don't look like me. I'm a big fan of Tim Tebow, and I love how every spring he organizes what's called a Night to Shine, prom for special needs youth. And he enlists the help of those without special needs to come and serve as waiters, ushers, fellow dance partners, and they build actual meaningful relationships, friendships with these students who have special needs. That is awesome. Now, if we think it through, I bet those students without special needs probably at the onset, a few of them, felt a little bit awkward. I feel a little bit uncomfortable. How am I supposed to chat with this person? How can I, have a good conversation where both of us get each other, etc. But they did it, and it was much easier than they thought. So my point here is that how are we intentionally putting our children in situations where empathy can be cultivated, where their hearts are softened, maybe even where their hearts are broken, at least a little bit, where their conscience is implicated, where they remember how fortunate they are? What are we doing? There's community service projects that maybe your kids do in the community. If not, I hope that you enlist them in those. Maybe missions trips. I have been on many missions trips, and plus just being Indian, we would go see our family members in India every handful of years. And so I remember very clearly all of the sadnesses I saw in India. We're driving around in a car, and these poor children wearing rags are coming up to my car and knocking on the window and putting their hand to their mouth because they're starving and just need a little bit for a little bit of rice. I've seen malnutrition and the ravaging effects of that, including deformity, children missing limbs, and that has always stuck with me. And that has changed me for the better. And so as an adult, not to toot my own horn, but we have focused on India, and to date, we've built 16 clean water wells in that country. We've also helped with this home that works with kids who have disabilities. So, I'm always going to care about that country. It's my homeland. And I understand that, youth aren't able to do a ton as it relates to social justice issues, but I'm sure they care about something. Let's try to extract it from them. Let's try to support, encourage, and even resource them to make a difference so that they realize life is a lot bigger than the dramas that they have to face. And it also, again, softens their heart and hopefully in time breaks their heart. We also want to use technology for good. So some of you follow the Humans of New York page on Instagram. The creator goes around, takes a picture, or multiple pictures of someone, and then in the caption tells their story. The story is largely about overcoming adversity or being in the midst of struggle. And that's why we connect to it. That's why this feed is so popular, because it's like, I feel pain just like they feel pain. I know that struggle and I've overcome, and I care about this person now because I know what they've gone through. And I want to help them. If I was in New York, I would absolutely help them if I ran into them, because now I know their story. Well, we have schools and students who come up with humans of blank, blank school. In this case, Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. They feature various stories of students. Again, students, this is student-led. And I hope you agree with me when I say that students are the most powerful catalyst for change. So we have to tap them, have to enlist them in our efforts. Well, you can see that in this case, they shared a story of the student and how, the student didn't really feel like they belonged, but eventually found a place of belonging at the school with a certain group of friends. And I felt that way. I felt like I didn't fit in, like I didn't belong. And so if I'm a student and I see this kid on campus, now my heart goes out to them. Now I want to chat with them, or at least smile at them. And if I get a chance to chat with them, I will, and I'll connect with them because, again, I know their story. So let's think about some cell phone regulation and rules. If the grades go down, I hope that tech use goes down as well. If they stop contributing to the family in terms of chores, well, tech use is going to go down as well. And you've heard this specific tip for a million years, but the story is that our kids are so willing to give up sleep just to stay on their phones, messaging, chatting, Snapchatting, scrolling through TikTok or whatever for all sorts of hours throughout the night. And then they show up to school as zombies on, Monday through Friday. And plus, when you ask them simple questions, they snap at you because they're exhausted. So maybe Sunday through Thursday night, you keep the devices in a designated location. Maybe on Fridays and Saturday nights, you have a little bit more leeway. It's your call. And then maybe you have some sort of requirement where they have to pay 10% of the monthly cell phone bill just as a periodic reminder that it does cost you something. I mean, they need to remember that it's a privilege and not a right. They're not entitled to their phone, to the internet and the Wi-Fi that you pay for, the router you pay for, the upgraded devices you buy, etc. I saw this on Twitter a few years ago and I love it. This mom was like, my new requirement is that if my kid wants to download a new app, she has to write a one-page report on the founder's company story and business model so she understands how the app benefits. I think that's great. And of course it won't work with super young kids, but we want our children to have their eyes wide open in terms of these companies and how, they're beholden to shareholders and they have to turn a profit with every, in every quarterly report. So it matters a huge deal. And they will exploit, as we've seen, our data. I don't like this at all. It's the parent who decided to shame their child. Their child made a mistake, so he, the father, commandeered the Instagram account of the child and is just posting selfies. We talked earlier about how destructive shaming a child can be. Please don't do it, and please don't do it publicly. This is one of my wife's friends. Her name is Bree, and they have this bed, I kid you not, 4 devices, where the devices go to bed before the children go to bed, and the devices are still asleep when the children wake up in the morning. And you keep it out of the room, and I know this won't work with high schoolers or upper schoolers, and it may not work with middle schoolers, but I think it's a good strategy for the younger kids. We know about sharenting. We've heard about sharenting for such a long time now. In this case, we had Gwyneth Paltrow posting a picture of her daughter, Apple, and Apple just went off on her in a comment. And the point here is that we always want to ask permission of our children before we upload a picture of them or a video of them, just because it's common courtesy. And we would want them to ask their peers, their friends, for their permission when they post on their own social media feeds. It's the right thing to do. So we need to be the model and ask them for permission so that they model that behavior when they want to post something, and they need to think through who's in it and who might not like this picture to be posted. I also think a lot about what we model. And you and I know some parents who are saying awful things on a Facebook page related to the district, or complaining about a school or another set of parents very publicly, et cetera, et cetera. And our kids are watching all that. And there's ways to deal with conflict and problems in a mature manner and in an immature manner. And I know sometimes all of us, including me, we get caught up in the emotions and we do something that maybe we're not super proud of. But you can see that, we've got parents admitting to talking on the cell phone, which maybe is not a big deal, speeding, which could be a big deal, texting while driving, not wearing a seatbelt, And so what are we modeling for our children? And do we change our behaviors when our kids point it out? Should they need to point it out? And then I want to bring up a phenomenon, or just something called narrative parenting. One of my colleagues, Dana Boyd, has coined that term. The point here is that you and I, we use our phone for many legitimate reasons, and we're not scrolling through Snapchat. We're not scrolling through, let's say, Instagram, I guess that would be Facebook, something like that. We have work to do. For example, we look at our weather app so we know what clothes to lay out for our child, how to plan our activities for the weekend. We pay bills, we send Venmos, and we use Cash.app to pay back for babysitting someone, etc. We might pay our mortgage, we might check our online banking, we might check our investments, like all that work, and hopefully boring to the kids. But if we say, this is what I'm doing right now, or, oh, this is what I'm doing right now, then our kids know that we're not just scrolling mindlessly through social media, but we're doing quote unquote work, meaningful, productive things to contribute to our family. I want to bring this up because I'm seeing this more and often. I want you to have a chat with your children if you've bought them a wearable device, because this is happening more often than you might think. In fact, people are bragging about it on social media. Now, if this happens in my university classes, I will, number one, fail that student from my class, and I will work to get that student expelled from the university. And that record will follow them as they try to get into another university. So please just have a talk with your child if they have any sort of devices that could be used for cheating, because you just don't want the temptation to be. Well, the temptation is there, but you want to have addressed it proactively.
How many days are we staying?
Check, मेरे को books मिले आपके dorm में.
I'm getting close to wrapping up here, and then we can open it up for Q&A.
मैं गई थी shower में, मुझे लगा you were in the shower, sweetie.
But what I want to say here is that, and no problem, I know what it's like to have little kids.
I am
like,
a little bit hesitant to tell you to go in the shower.
No, I was literally coming up to go in the shower.
Okay.
what I want to say here, and appreciate everyone being gracious, is that
Because I remember I told you need to be done by 6:47,
rough.
sweetie.
it's so rough to work with screen time issues. Thank you. It's so rough to work with screen time issues with our children. I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I hear this guidance from the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which tells me that up until age 18 months, and then ideally up to 2 years, no screen time. And then from 2 years to 5 years, only 1 hour of screen time. And then after 5 years, some specific constant rules. But then I look at the data, and the data shows that 12 months, kids who are 12 months of age average 53 minutes of screen time. That's just the reality. And kids who are 3 years of age average 150 minutes of screen time every single day. So what's the reality? The AAP could prescribe these sort of guidelines, but can we actually do that? So it's miserably tough. And what I want to share with you right now is more and more kids are going back to the classroom setting full time. And that'll definitely happen when we're starting school in the fall. And so the first thing that I'll say here, and let me see if I can mute that person. Okay. I don't want to have to stop sharing my screen, but please turn on please turn off your microphone. Please mute it if you're able to. Okay, the first thing I want to say with regard to this transition back to, let's say, normalcy, over the last 12 months, they have probably used their devices and their gaming consoles a lot more often than we would have liked, but we had to survive. I get that. But can we pack their schedules as they move back to a normal life with more activities? And I know that we might, I'm sort of speaking from a privileged position where some families can do that and some families just cannot do that. But the more activities that they have, the more their schedule is packed, the less they will just sort of gravitate towards their phone, which is what they have done and made a habit of over the last 12 months, because that's all they have had. They haven't had in-person school. They haven't had soccer and lacrosse and dance and cheerleading and gymnastics and all the other things that they might be doing. So number one, try to pack their schedule, even if it's with play dates. That could go a long way. Secondly, I want you to collaborate with them when it comes to what they need to do in order to earn screen time. Validate their voice. I know it's easy to say, only this amount, and I don't want you talking to strangers because there's a lot of creepy pedophiles out there. They don't want to hear that, and they feel like you're clueless, to be honest. Instead, what you should say is, okay, how are you keeping yourself safe online? What are some things that you're doing? And I know that you're doing certain things, and have you really familiarized yourself with all the controls in that game, so that if someone starts mouthing off on voice chat when you're wearing your microphone and headset, that you know what to do. Things like that. Just, convey that you have some level of trust in their intelligence. And again, work with them so that they suggest something related to how they have to earn screen time, and then you modify it and you go back and forth, and then it's an agreement. They're going to find some things online that you don't want them seeing. And we can have filters in place, and they work for a while. But I still believe that in time, their friend is going to show them something. They're going to be able to access the web and the internet at another location. And we just can't prevent everything that they search for and what they might see. So I would ask you to have these proactive conversations about what they might discover through searches. Even if you have things on restricted mode, you only use YouTube Kids, you only use Facebook Messenger Kids, you have specific software, et cetera, they're still going to discover it in time. So get in front of it through conversation. And then I alluded to this, but we've got to be careful about conveying judgment, because when we do, they just shut down and they don't want to open up to us. But instead, we want them to be able to come to us whenever they receive anything that makes them feel creeped out or uncomfortable or that's like unpleasant. And if we have set up a judgment-free zone and we're reminding them of that, and even with our body language, we're careful not to convey blame or criticism, then they open up to us over time, because then they can trust us. And what do we want most of all? Them to come to us so we can help them. On our website, we have this technology use contract, which outlines expectations for the child, but also for the parent. You will be calm, you'll be reasonable, you will not take drastic measures. So both parents can, again, both the kid and the parent or the caretaker can read over it together, sign it after printing it out, post it in a visible location. Once again, reminding everyone that we all agreed to these certain rules. One of my colleagues, Dr. Kristen Matheson, came up with these would you rather flashcards. And I want you to use them because they're fun. The would you rather game has always been fun, but now with like a tech aspect or slant, you can have your kids open up to you a little bit more related to what they're doing. You can ask follow-up questions because this is fun and it gets their imagination thinking. So again, look these up or email me and I'll send them to you. On our website, we also have a document which shows you how easy it is to have conversations about harassment or abuse that takes place in different environments. This screenshot only shows Fortnite, but we cover a number of environments. Please check that out. The document is called Cyberbullying Scripts. I've also written 23 scenarios. Scenarios are so important according to the research because when you work through a scenario with your child, then they have an action plan for when they're harassed or when they're abused or mistreated or threatened, or when it happens to someone that they see, like when they're a witness or a bystander. They then know what to do because they've thought through the situation. When I give presentations to students through assemblies, I talk about a lot of things, but one of the things we talk about is screenshots. Hopefully all of you know that you can take a screenshot on any device, Kindle, PlayStation, Xbox, iWatch. We need screenshots for digital evidence so the school can do the investigation and so that the social media company or gaming platform can exercise some sort of sanction or discipline, banning the account, deleting the account, taking down that piece of content. Also, please remind them about screen recording. Screen recording, you can set up in iOS or Android to take recordings, so videos of TikToks, live streams, Insta stories, Snapchat stories. Again, we need that digital evidence. Make sure they know how to do that whenever they see any problematic content. Almost done here. When your child is the target, remain calm. That's huge because again, our kids pick up on anything and we don't want them to shut down. Make sure they're safe physically, of course, but also psychologically and emotionally. I mentioned the importance of evidence. Work with the school, but please give them time. They care a lot about these issues. They are doing a lot of proactive stuff, like I mentioned, but they need time to investigate, to interview witnesses, to look at their paper trail to see if anything has bubbled up in the past, etc. So just give them time. Contact the parents of the offender, and maybe they are very understanding and they discipline that child. Hopefully that's the case. And work with the content providers. If it takes any of you all more than 24 to 48 hours to get content taken down that you know is harassing, that violates the rules of the app or the game, please message me and I'll do all that I can to help you get it taken down. And then work with the police. Threats, sexually explicit pictures of minors, stalking, like location tracking, things like that. When your child's the aggressor, cultivate empathy, monitor usage, install software if you want. I'll talk about that as we close. And then apply consequences, but stick to your consequences. I am learning being a parent that it's very easy to discipline my child after they mess up, but then just want to demonstrate all sorts of love and snuggles with them. And we should, for sure. But it doesn't mean that there still aren't any consequences for what they did. So no, I mean, I'm not giving you ice cream after dinner because we talked about how you lost that privilege, despite how much they beg. So people always ask me about software. I've checked out a bunch. I have no relationships with any of these companies, but I really do like Circle Plus because you can, on a granular level, as you can see, control Instagram, TikTok, Minecraft, Roblox, etc. How much time you can set up rewards, so you give them extra time as necessary. You can set up, you can make all of this sort of specific to this iPad, but not this Kindle, or this device, but not this device, this laptop, but not this desktop computer. Yes, my partner, but not my little kid. You can pause the internet and etc. It gives you these detailed reports, which you'll love. So check it out. And I think that you'll find it useful if you want. And finally, I do like Life360 for location tracking. I know we have Find My iPhone and Find My whatever. And on Tuesday, we learned that Apple is really building out that product. So we'll see what they do in terms of improvement. Android has their own product, but I still like Life360 because it's dead easy to use. And I love the reports for tracking our children. By the way, you should tell them that you're tracking them. It takes a village. We know that. I mean, we all have a role to play. So if you have any platform with youth, whether you're a Boy Scout leader, whether you're a coach or a mentor in the community or an educator, whatever it is, I mean, please take the time to bring up this sort of stuff. Maybe when you're stretching one day before you actually, like pre or post workout or pre or post activity. Maybe you're driving to a meet all together in a van. Maybe you could bring it up. I would love for you to do so because, again, we need all hands on deck to talk about these sorts of issues. If you need anything, I'm easy to find online. I mentioned I'm very active on Twitter, so consider following me because I'm always sharing useful resources and our latest findings and just the best possible things that you as parents and educators would want to know. You can always email me as well. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can go over the chats. We can go over anything. And if anything comes across your, let's say, dining table tomorrow or the next day or whatever, you can reach out to me. You have a friend in me and I promise to get back to you. My presentation is not in the Google Drive, but again, just email me. I'll type in my email address here and I will get it over to you, PDF format. At what age should a parent stop tracking their kids? Good question. Thank you, Bonnie. What I would say is, hopefully as your kid is getting older, they continue to demonstrate that they're worthy of your trust. They haven't violated your trust and done something really bad. So you continue to let out the proverbial, I guess, leash, even though we don't like that conceptualization, but you know what I mean. You give them more and more freedoms. And so I would imagine that when they get to their high school years, they don't want to be tracked, but they have to continue to demonstrate that they are worthy of your trust. And frankly, if it was me, if they're still under my roof, I have every right to be able to track them and just be able to check an app to see where they are because, okay, they go to a party, they go mini golfing. Yeah, I want to see that you're there and you're supposed to be home by 10 p.m., but you're not. Well, it's just, we have technology. Why don't I use it to see that you're safe, to see that you're at a specific place where you say you're going to be? So I would unfortunately keep tracking them while they're under my roof, but I would let them know that this is just how it is. It's part and parcel of the fact that this is a privilege and not a right. You're welcome, Tyrone. Happy to help. Sadhana, you're welcome. Jennifer, let me scroll up. Amrita, to make sure I don't miss any questions or comments. Let's see here. Yep, I gave you my email. What was the book that turned my life? Again, it was Of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham. Of Human Bondage, about a kid who struggled with a physical deformity. I still can relate to that. I don't have a physical deformity, that's the thing, but we all have certain things about us that we don't like. And Aaliyah, if you don't mind, drop me an email and I'll send you a list of books and movies, or you can just get my slides and you can look at the screenshots and you'll see them. Thank you. And yes, please go ahead and share with kids if you want the content that I shared. You might want to tear out the pages that you're not comfortable bringing up. For example, I wouldn't bring up sextortion to a elementary schooler, but I am comfortable bringing it up, and educators want me to bring it up when I speak to middle school age students. So, and sexting as well. The youngest texting case I've ever dealt with was 4th grade. And of course, we hate to see that. We hate to hear about that, but that's just the reality. It's extremely, extremely rare, but it does happen. Insignificant events in the life of a cactus. I don't know that. Thank you, Ashley. I will make a note. That sounds like such a great story too. What do you do when his closest friend is taking his smartphone to the playground during elementary years? How do you address that conversation with their parents? That's tricky. Maybe you'll agree with me where it's like, oh man, elementary school, do they really need to be having a smartphone? And I'm not saying that you should parent how I parent, but it just, you wonder if, developmentally, neurologically, they're capable of making the best decisions with that smartphone. Maybe your child is. In those situations, I think you just have to be bold and you have to broach the conversation and say, look, if you had a request of me, I would absolutely honor that request related to my child. I'm asking you to honor this request as it relates to your child taking pictures with his smartphone of my children and doing who knows what with it, posting it. I mean, you never know what could be done with it. It could be all over the dark web. You have no idea. Not to freak you out, but I'm just saying, you want to be able to control your pictures of your child, especially elementary school. Scroll down here. I think I caught everything. And again, you have my website, cyberbullying.org is our cyberbullying research center, always posting new stuff, always. And also my personal site is hinduja.org. Again, Hinduja, my last name.org. If you want to learn more about me, there's more resources, not resources, but yeah, just fun facts about me. My favorite books, movies, activities, things like that. I have some presentations on YouTube and talks, so you can do a search for them. Otherwise, I mean, maybe you get a chance to hear me. Amita, I apologize, I mispronounced your name earlier. Amita, maybe you can get a chance to hear me when I come to Texas or do something else for educators around you. If you want, just drop me an email and I'll keep you in mind and let you know of other stuff that I do. And I also have an events page on our website. I'll say group, so someone talks about group chats and they're texting all day. How do we control this? That's just how they do life these days, to be honest. And that's actually been really good for them emotionally and psychologically, particularly during COVID, because when they went to school, they would see their friends, but since they couldn't because of COVID, they had these group chats. They're very positive, but I would ask you to have a conversation with your children about group chats, only because what we see is group chats allowing for this sort of inclusive, cool group or squad, which means other people are on the outside. And they sometimes intentionally exclude other people just so they feel more special about their in-crowd, in-group. In-crowd? Yeah, that's the right word. So that's not nice. That's not kind. And I'm sure all of our children have felt like they were on the outside of other people's groups. So if you can have a conversation with them about that, maybe they could be a leader in their own group chat about being more inclusive. Your group doesn't lose cool factors when you ask or invite somebody else in to join it. It actually increases cool factors, cool points, because you're being more inclusive. Mary Lou, if you could drop me an email, that would be great. I will not be speaking to kids at lower middle specifically, but if I can help those administrators in any capacity, Ellie, please have them reach out to me. I'm happy to do that. Appreciate your kind words. That means a lot to me. You can tell I'm super passionate about this sort of stuff because I live and breathe it. And I know what it's like to, we all know what it's like to grow up. Like, it's miserably hard. If we can save other people headaches and heartaches and stress and drama and pain and fallout, then we should do that. Is there such thing as technology addiction? I don't love the word addiction, but you just want to, of course, like with everything, moderation, balance. And so you just, hopefully, and maybe I can talk to you one-on-one about your own situation, Jan. It really depends on the kid and trying to figure out what else they could be really into, how else we can open their eyes and broaden their horizons. You're welcome, Chris. Appreciate your kind words. Y'all gave up a lot of time your evening when there's so much else to do. So I'm thankful for that. Thanks, Ashley. Let me see. Same question as Trudy about games. So let me try to scroll up and try to catch that question that Trudy mentioned related to games. I'm scrolling. Okay, do you have any resources on games that children like, that doesn't deal with shooting, killing, murdering, etc.? These games are fun to them, but it's not what I want them to ponder. That's fair. That's fair. I will say though that research doesn't show that our kids become more violent because they play violent games. Violent games are being played all across the world, but yet America is the one with the problem of violence, not, let's say, all these countries in the Far East and in Europe, et cetera. So it's something endemic to our culture here. And if you just drop me an email, Trudy, and whoever else, I will, and the age of your child, I will get you a list of games that I would recommend to them. Did I talk about correlation between internet and phone time and depression? I did not specifically in this presentation. I also want to stay in my lane and not speak out of turn, because there are experts who focus exclusively on screen time and then anxiety and depression. And I don't, that's not my area of expertise. So I'm happy to try to connect you with someone who does work in that area, Trish, if you would like. How do you talk to kids middle school age about porn? That's really tricky as well. Elle, if you don't mind, I would like to connect you to somebody else who that's like their specialty. I wish I had an answer for you all, but again, I do not, and I'm just being honest with you as well about what I do know and what I don't know. And I don't want to just speculate, even if it's informed speculation. That doesn't serve you.
Any last questions? All right. Well, Samir, we really thank you for being with us tonight, actually being with us all day. Gave some great strategies and tools that our parents can use, but also earlier today with our administrators and counselors, just had tremendous feedback from them. Obviously, you're passionate and really care about kids, and we just appreciate the great work that you do, and also appreciate you sharing resources. For those of you who haven't been to his website, there's a tremendous amount of resources, and he has been very instrumental in helping us with some cases this year and last year where some things were put up on sites like Instagram and we couldn't get them down, and he was able to do that. And so we just really appreciate all the great work that you do. And also just appreciate everyone's time tonight, and we really thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of the school year. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.